Oh my god, what am I doing? Hi everybody, welcome to Just Thinking Out Loud. This video is about my views on the Take the Knee protest that happened during the traditional honoring of the national anthem during a football game. I still don't know why this is called football since you're not actually kicking the ball with your foot. The protests were done to protest the mistreatment of minorities in the United States and to protest police brutality in general. However, initially when taking the knee was done about a year ago, it was done by another football player called Colin Kaepernick, and it was done in the context of Black Lives Matter, and he was a big supporter of that. I'm going to get into some other points, but my main point at the end of this video is going to be that I think certain people, mostly on the left, are allowed to bring their political positions into their general life and mainstream life, such as during their work hours when they're serving people. However, other people, such as conservatives and people on the right, are not allowed to do the same thing. And I specifically bring up the firing of the Google engineer, our ex-Google engineer, James Damore. In this recent event, there were also more players willing to take the knee after Trump made comments that they were disrespecting the national anthem and the flag and the country, and that they should be fired. The first thing I'm going to focus on is the actual issue that they claim to be protesting, that be the mistreatment of minorities in this country. As far as I know, there are no longer any laws holding minorities back. In fact, I would say that there are laws and a social and cultural atmosphere specifically aimed at pointing out mistreatment of minorities and helping them. In some ways, this ends up hindering other people who do not have a special privileged status. People do this in efforts to reverse past wrongdoings. In my opinion, that's a terrible idea, but that's why they do these things. The mistreatment that people are generally referring to is a difference in outcomes between different populations defined by racial categories. They attribute this to racism since these laws are no longer on the law books. The only thing that I personally take issue with is the war on drugs, not because it is disproportionately affecting Black people, but because I think it's not the government's business. I don't believe that more Black people end up in jail because they are targeted, but because according to the law, they are behaving differently. Again, I have no support for this law whatsoever, but I don't think it's because they're being targeted. I was also doing some reading recently on how the war on drugs was heavily supported by middle-class Black families because it was destroying their communities. And it's not just that this law was created to target Black people from the wider society, but was actually a product of Black society, or was heavily supported by Black members of society to help out their own communities. It wasn't just because the United States hated Black people, but I hope this is a lesson that you should not try and fix social problems through the government. But I digress because I wanted to talk about police brutality. Do these celebrities actually want to bring attention to this issue and focus on how to help? Well, I made a video recently on Black Lives Matter and police brutality where I basically concluded that it was a very minor issue affecting the Black community and the United States in general. It was also an issue that affected not only Black people but other races as well. However, the media tends to highlight and cherry pick whose suffering gets to be shown. I further pointed out that many people actually ignore the violence that goes on in Black communities. This is not Black communities in general, but impoverished, generally inner city ones. It does not apply to all of Black Americans. But if people want to talk about violence in the Black community, then they should really focus on those things. However, that video and actually my entire channel seem to be pretty quickly censored. And if people want to bring up these topics, then they should be wanting discourse. But actually, what they want to do is bring up the topic, but only allow you to talk about it in ways that they think are right and to follow their conclusions on the topic. It's not actually something that people can discuss openly and learn from. Actually, nothing about race in this country is. People are constantly screwed up like a lemon about it because they can't just talk about things. Now, for an actual solution to the problem, which taking a knee is not, I think that people should focus on economics and cultural change. Things that don't involve people going up and protesting, but actually involves a lot of individual work. I don't just say this because I think that the wider society shouldn't try and make things better, but not in a way that is unfair to other people and not in a way that absolves the people that they are trying to help from their own personal responsibility. I think that they already made things better by removing those laws. I think that's all they need to do. I don't think that government or people in power should try and fix social issues. I think social issues become fixed by the actual people involved and their daily interactions with each other. I think they should just be allowed to interact on their own terms rather than having a top-down narrative imposed upon them. It just makes people uncomfortable. I can't tell you how many times people have been afraid of offending me. I've had that more than people actually being offensive to me, people being afraid of it The way forward for anybody is economics, not platitudes and things that make us feel good. I know that sounds very cold, but that's what's actually worked for any group that came to this country, the United States, and experienced discrimination. It was not through politics and fanfare and extravaganza on the TV. Specific strategies include making it easier for people to pick up skills that they need to build up their human capital. The people who are the low wage earners who can't compete effectively and provide skills that others want. This includes stopping immigration. It also includes removing the minimum wage. It also includes making it easier for companies to hire others. And it also includes making it easier for people to start their own companies. Again, for however anti-capitalist you might want to be and think that this is just exploiting people, that is really how any other group has worked their way up. They started with not very much, but they were able to pick up the skills that they need. This also requires inner effort because you have to be focused on those things and understand the value of those things, including education, which allows you to be hired, or economics, which allows you to compete. It is through having competitive advantage. Big note here, not through the government, not through politics, but through purely competing in the free market, or what is left of the free market. If this ever happens, it will not be televised on TV. It's going to be a silent cultural revolution. And I think that's possible just because the opposite happened from what I've heard and researched, which is that, especially concerning the breakdown of the family and how things have declined, it can obviously go the other way, but that does require cultural shift. And those incentives aren't in place now. And they may never come in place. And I really urge people from the bottom of my heart to try and not look outside to solve your problems. I know that sounds like being mean and heartless, but it's not, because you cannot expect anybody else to change things for you and to fix things for you, even though people out there might want to. It has to be something that you take on for yourself. At least that's my perspective. This sort of change especially will not happen while there is still anger and pain being directed at the society that people are supposed to thrive in. Furthermore, even if the white supremacy mantra were true, which I don't think it is, that does not mean that people cannot succeed. Racism, believe it or not, is not enough of a reason why people cannot succeed in the society that they are in. See the success of any group anywhere in the world that has had the proper skills needed. In that case, I would acknowledge difficulty, but that's no excuse. These people want things to change, but they refuse to criticize the culture. Things don't work that way. There are differences in approach to education. I remember reading a study about the number of books in the home in certain communities. There are differences in approach to law enforcement. There are differences in approach to rearing children in terms of things like corporal punishment. There are differences in terms of mating and marriage. All these things differ among different population groups defined by race, and they affect what we call success. So why aren't we talking about them when also discussing the differences in outcome? Because the inputs do matter. There is an assumption for people who want to change things through social policy that all groups behave the same and are the same, and I simply don't think that's true. If people want to stand behind minorities and show support for their growth and advancement in this country, then I think that's fine, but not in this setting, especially when it cannot come from the other side. I know that I couldn't go up there on stage in my position and say these things that I'm saying because it would be criticizing. And then they will change what they say they're talking about and say it's not about just minorities, but it's about police brutality in general. But you know that it's a racial issue because everything is a racial issue to them. We all know that only some groups are allowed to be victims, even though other people experience the same thing. It's really funny. I don't know if people think that white people are all just rich and privileged, because they're really not. Like, I've seen that for myself just traveling and being here, that it's not true. And I think that they should focus on those actual things and don't divide it up by race. Moving on to Trump's comments about them being fired and that they were disrespecting the flag and the country. I think that they were disrespecting the flag and the country. I also think it wasn't the place for that. If I put myself in their shoes, however, and I believe that I am really protesting something that is so grossly unfair and that society at large is ignoring, and something so important, I could understand why they are doing it. However, the problem is that there is a double standard, and if I were arguing from the opposite side about something that I think is wholly important, actually my whole channel is about me being sick of identity politics, even though it's all I talk about is me trying to rail against so many of the things that people say in the media and on the TV, and that they're just like propagating out there for everybody to just follow. You are only allowed to do these things when it fits the acceptable narrative. So if some people can't bring their politics into an arena like that, then I think that they also should not be able to bring their politics into an arena like that. I also think that that's just not a good idea, because there are lots of people who disagree with you, and they are not in that forum to talk about politics. They're there to talk about sports. The other thing I noticed is that I really don't like these news reporters claiming to talk about how do Black Americans feel about this. You know, I'm sure they feel XYZ. You cannot talk for Black people because they don't think all one way. Does that blow your mind? CBC? People on the left don't own Black people just because they think, whether right or wrong, that they are actually defending them. Real diversity is diversity of thought. It's not skin color, and that's why there are so many problems with this stuff, because that is not a good way to identify someone. I know you think it is, and I guess racially there were these distinct cultures, but that's not how it really works, especially in the rest of the world. One more thing, this trying to blame all this racism stuff on Trump is stupid. I love how they're always going on about how this has been going on for a long time in this country, and we're still living through all of this suffering, but then when it comes to what's happening today, it's all Trump's fault. It's all Trump's fault because he's stirring up the pot, and they cannot see that they are also stirring up the pot. I also want to add from my perspective that the most racism I've actually experienced in this country has been from Black people towards me because I'm not like them, and also against white people because they think that they are all evil. I think that racism does come from the other side. That is, that there are white people who are racist and probably take racist actions, but only because people tell me that. You know, that's not something I've ever experienced, and I do think that you only hear one side because people feel comfortable telling it to you because you're their race. But I personally have not experienced that, and the only thing that I've really actually questioned, one was with an Asian guy and one was with a Hispanic guy, and that's it. Those are the only times that I've been like treated a certain way, and I've been like, like really thought that that could be it. I think the media needs to stop telling one side of the story. There was just that Tennessee church shooting the other day that not a lot of people are talking about, which was very clearly racially motivated. Unlike many things that they just turned it into a race issue, even though it's not actually clear that's what was going on. I really think the media should just stop talking about it completely, but that's never going to happen because it's such a great wound to pick at. So if they're going to talk about it, then they should show all sides of the issue. And I think they need to start talking about the anti-white racism in this country, because a lot of people are going to get angry about it and it is going to come out. And the double standard is so clear to me, it's not even funny. And I'm not trying to pick up for white people. I just think that when it comes to the mainstream media narrative, they completely ignore the racism that goes the other way. Some other minor things I wanted to rebut was that people were saying that Trump defended neo-Nazis' rights to free speech, but they won't defend these NFL players' rights. It's totally not the same context. First of all, those people at the rally were not all neo-Nazis. Second of all, they had a permit that they had to fight to get for, even though free speech is their First Amendment. Third of all, they weren't even able to have the rally that they wanted. And again, I am not a supporter of certain people, and I know that there were definitely racist people in there, but the football game is a completely different context. They were at work, and it was a tradition that was being honored. They didn't have some special permit to do what they needed to do and to self-organize the way that they wanted to. So it's not the same thing. I was also noticing on this one video, the same one by CBC, that just made my stomach feel funny, that they disabled the comments, and it's so funny. It's like they just want to tell you what to think and they don't want any feedback. So those are my thoughts. As always, I could be wrong, but that is what I see going on. I will talk to you soon. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to support the show. Have a good day. Goodbye.